They said, "Just wait here. We'll grab the urn." Then I heard laughter as they drove off with my husband's ashes. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. A tasteless, cruel joke, but a joke nonetheless. My hands were still folded in my lap, my purse resting neatly against my side, the scent of the crematorium's lobby still lingering on my coat. I had dressed properly. Navy wool with a pearl brooch, the one George gave me on our 40th anniversary. I'd even worn gloves, though it was hardly cold. But it felt like the kind of day that demanded gloves. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. The parking lot stayed empty except for the birds scratching near the dumpster and a crumpled soda cup rolling with the wind. At some point, I stepped out of the car and looked toward the building. No one. The receptionist inside glanced up, smiled faintly, then returned to her paperwork. She clearly thought I was waiting for someone. I was. When I checked my phone, there were no missed calls, no messages. Only the wallpaper. George and I in Maine, wind-blown and sunburnt, grinning at nothing in particular. That was 5 years ago, before his lungs turned on him. The cremation was this morning. Small. Too small. My daughter said, Dad wouldn't want fuss, and her husband agreed. They'd made the arrangements, chose the urn, picked the music. A country song George hated, but I wasn't asked. I had nodded when told, not asked, not included. Just nodded. I sat back in the car and waited another 10 minutes. Then it dawned on me, slowly and heavily, like a fog settling behind the eyes. They weren't coming back? Not today. Maybe not ever. The laughter, I hadn't imagined that. I'd heard it. Just as the engine started, I'd heard it. Not loud or hysterical, just amused. Light, like it was all nothing. As though the urn they carried wasn't my husband of 52 years, but some bag of groceries they'd remembered to take along. I didn't cry, not right away. I sat, my coat buttoned, my shoes neat, my purse upright. I was always careful with my posture. Years of being told to be presentable, ladylike, gracious. But inside, something was starting to come undone, not like a thread. No, more like a seam splitting along an old line, the kind you don't notice until the whole sleeve begins to fall. When I finally started the car, it felt wrong to go home. That house, our house, had been George's too, and he wasn't coming back to it. Not even in an urn. They'd taken that, along with everything else they'd quietly claimed in the month since he got sick. It was our daughter's idea that they store the documents. "We'll keep track of the estate stuff, Mom. You shouldn't have to worry." I'd let her. After all, wasn't that what children were for? To ease the burden? Now I wasn't sure which burden I'd passed on and which one they'd created. I drove around the block twice before heading back to the house. The keys trembled in the ignition, not because I was cold, but because my hands didn't know what to do. Rage wasn't something I was used to. Disappointment, yes. Sorrow, often. But not this. This was a fire. A low, clean burn. The house was quiet, of course. No one waiting inside. No casserole dishes. No neighbors dropping by. Just the faint tick of the kitchen clock and the creak of the floorboards I'd meant to have fixed years ago. George would have known how to fix them. I hung my coat by the door, unwrapped my scarf. Then I stood in the living room and looked around. The photo shelf. Us on the porch. Us with baby Liz. Us in matching sweaters one Christmas. George had hated. I'd loved that photo. Not because he looked good in red, he didn't, but because he hadn't protested. He'd worn it for me. I picked up that frame. My hands stopped shaking. They had left me behind. But they'd also left something else behind. The illusion that I was needed. That I mattered as more than the polite ornament of family history. The truth had been there for years, only I'd refused to see it. It was there in the short phone calls, the missed birthdays, the decisions made without me, for me, around me. I had been erased gently, silently, like dust from a mantle. Today, though, they'd made it clear. They didn't forget me in that car. They excluded me. That's when I knew they would not get one more thing from me. Not my house, not my savings, and certainly not my silence. Not anymore. When I walked into the kitchen, the light was too bright. I'd left the blinds up this morning, thinking maybe the sun might help. It didn't. I set the picture frame on the table and sat down beside it, folding my hands like I was waiting for someone. But there was no one to wait for. There hadn't been for a long time. George was gone, and our daughter, Liz, had taken what was left of him. Not just the urn. That wasn't the worst of it. It was the choice, the clarity of it. They'd chosen to leave me behind. And still, I wasn't surprised. Not really. Last month, she'd asked for access to the house deed, said it was for streamlining things. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. But George's name was on it, and mine too. That house, this house, was built on 25 years of double shifts and Sunday mornings spent fixing what we couldn't afford to replace. George used to say, "If it's ours, it's sacred." I'd believed that. I still did. But Liz, she believed in other things. Convenience, efficiency, sleek documents and email threads I never saw. When her husband, Todd, called the bank on my behalf, I let it go. When they changed the locks on George's storage shed, for safety, I let it go. I even let it go when they told me I should probably downsize, because a woman your age doesn't need all that space. What space? The front porch where I drank coffee with George every morning for 40 years. The attic where he'd kept his old fishing gear, and I'd told him I'd throw it out every summer, but never did. The hallway closet with his slippers still sitting beneath the coats. They'd taken the ashes today. They'd already taken the rest. I stood up, walked slowly to the secretary desk by the window, the one I inherited from my mother. Inside were all the papers I'd filed over the years. I knew where everything was, labeled, sorted. Unlike the rest of me lately, the folder marked Liz and Todd was the thickest. Checks, loans, a co-signed mortgage from 2011, a private school tuition payment I'd made in cash, a car lease I'd paid off when their second child, Carter, was born, and they couldn't manage 2 payments. I didn't need a calculator to know how much money I'd poured into their lives. I didn't do it out of guilt. I did it because I believed that was what mothers did, especially when their own mothers hadn't done it for them. But now, I opened my checkbook, looked at the last entry. February 3rd. Gift for Carter's braces. $4,000. They hadn't called to thank me. I reached for the landline, still plugged into the kitchen wall, even though Liz said no one uses those anymore, and dialed the bank. "Good afternoon, First Shore Community," a young woman answered, chipper in that practiced way. "How can I help you today?" "My name is Martha Bellamy. I need to speak with my account manager, please." "Of course. One moment." As the hold music played, I looked around the room. The tile George had laid himself. The faded clock above the fridge. The same table we'd bought secondhand in 1973 and never replaced. Finally, a voice came through. "Mrs. Bellamy? This is Patrick." "Hello, Patrick. I need to make some changes. Starting today." "Certainly. What would you like to discuss?" I want to cancel all scheduled transfers and direct payments associated with Liz and Todd Taylor. Everyone. There was a pause. I see. Would you like to freeze those accounts temporarily or permanently? And I'd like to remove any third-party authorizations they have. Patrick cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. I'll just need to verify. I'm prepared for that, I said. And I was. I answered every question, gave every code, passed every checkpoint. Not a tremble in my voice. Not this time. As Patrick clicked away at his keyboard, I felt something loosen inside. Not relief. Not yet. But a beginning. I've marked everything for removal, he said after a few minutes. But we'll need your signature to finalize. I can schedule a visit or arrange for a courier. I'll come in tomorrow morning, first thing. Understood. Is there anything else I can do for you today? Yes. I paused. I'd like to set up a new account, a trust. Not for Liz, not for Todd, for someone who's never asked me for a single thing. There was another pause, longer this time. Certainly, Mrs. Bellamy. We can begin that tomorrow, too. Thank you, Patrick. When I hung up, the house was silent again. But it felt different now. Lighter. Not joyful. That wasn't the word. Just less burdened. I walked to the hallway, opened the closet, and pulled out the urn shelf George had built for his parents. I dusted it gently, placed it on the mantel. There would be no ashes to fill it with. Not now. But I left it there anyway. As a reminder. That night, I slept in George's robe. I'd done that the week after he died, when the smell of him was still tucked in the collar. That scent had faded now, replaced by laundry detergent and time. But the weight of the fabric still meant something, like he was near, like I wasn't entirely alone in the house that now echoed when I walked. In the morning, I made coffee stronger than usual and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. I didn't know exactly what I was going to write. I only knew I had to write something. A list, maybe. Not of things I needed. I'd learned long ago not to expect much from that. No, a list of what I'd given. It began easily enough. Down payment on Liz and Todd's first home. $28,000 private school tuition, years 1-5. $44,000 Todd's failed landscaping business. $15,000 loan, never repaid. Carter's braces. Madison's summer camp, 3 years in a row. Their new fridge last Christmas. Medical copays when Todd was between jobs. New roof after the storm. They couldn't claim it on insurance. Monthly grocery cards, just until things stabilize. By the time I got to the second page, the numbers blurred. And still, none of it had hurt as much as yesterday. They had taken George's remains and left me sitting alone in a parking lot. Not because they forgot. Not because they were late. But because they had decided I didn't belong. That was the word. Decided. This hadn't come out of nowhere. This wasn't about grief or stress or miscommunication, as Liz would surely claim when the fallout began. No, this was a decision. A long building one. The end result of 1,000 small exclusions. A death by degrees. I set the pen down and poured another cup of coffee. I hadn't eaten, but I didn't feel hungry. I felt quiet. A strange, powerful quiet. Like the kind you get just before a storm. Not the storm outside, but the one you carry inside you. Finally ready to move. I spent the morning cleaning. Not because the house was messy, but because cleaning helped me think. I dusted George's side of the closet, then my own. I packed a few boxes. Not of donations. Not yet. Just things I hadn't touched in years. I didn't need clutter right now. I needed clarity. At noon, I called my lawyer. Henry, this is Martha Bellamy. Well, hello there, Martha. I'm sorry again about George. I meant to... Henry, I need to come in. Today. A pause. Of course. I've got an opening at 2:30. Is everything all right? No, Henry, I said, not unkindly. Everything is not all right, but it's going to be. At 2:15, I pulled into his office parking lot in my old Subaru. I still had the "Support Our Seniors" bumper sticker George insisted on. It always made me laugh, like we weren't the seniors it referred to. Henry met me in the lobby. He was older now, like all of us, but still wore his hair too slick and his tie too bright. George used to tease him about both. "What can I do for you?" he asked, guiding me into his wood-paneled office. "I want to change my will." Henry blinked. "Okay, that's simple enough. And I want to establish a revocable trust, managed by me alone. All assets transferred, immediately." Henry raised his eyebrows. "You're sure?" "I'm certain." "May I ask why the sudden—" "You may not," I said gently. "Not yet." He nodded. "Understood." The papers took over an hour. He walked me through every step, every form, every clause. I read every word. When he asked for beneficiaries, I said, "My granddaughter, Lily. She's the only one who still visits and never asks for anything." "And Liz?" he asked carefully. I looked him in the eye. "No." He said nothing, just kept writing. When everything was signed, scanned, and filed, I stood to leave. "I'll need copies mailed," I said, "and one kept here. But no disclosures. Not yet." "Of course," he said. "You'll let me know when." "I will." Back home, I sat on the porch with a glass of water. The wind was picking up. Clouds were shifting. My body ached in its usual ways: knees, shoulders, something in my lower back. But inside, I felt centered. Like something had clicked back into place after years of being slightly off kilter. At 4:43 p.m., Liz called. I didn't answer. She called again at 4:47. Then a text. "Hey, Mom. Sorry. Yesterday got chaotic. Can we stop by tonight?" I looked at the message. Then at the porch steps. George never got around to repainting. Then back at the message. I turned the phone off and placed it beside me. The quiet returned, and I welcomed it. By morning, the silence had changed. It was no longer the peace of decision. It had turned into something else. A waiting silence, taut and humming, like the hush before the first word in a courtroom, like breath held too long. They would come today. I could feel it. They wouldn't leave things unanswered, not when there was money at stake. I brewed coffee and made toast, not because I wanted it, but because ritual steadied the hands. I folded the dish towel exactly like George did, in thirds, then in half, and hung it back on the oven handle. He used to tease me for being so orderly, but he was the same way. We were two practical people who built a life out of quiet habits and unpaid debts, and for 52 years, it had been enough. At 10:13 a.m., I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not one car. Two. Todd's black SUV and Liz's leased sedan. Always leased, never owned. Too much commitment, too little control. I didn't get up. Let them knock. They did. 3 times. Pause. Then again, louder. I heard Liz's voice through the door. Light, falsely cheerful. "Mom, it's us." "Of course it is." I waited another 30 seconds, then opened the door. "Hi, Mom," she said too brightly. Todd gave a weak nod, holding what looked like a pastry box. I didn't move from the threshold. She hesitated. "Can we come in?" "You already did yesterday," I said. "With George's ashes." Her smile twitched. "Oh, that. Mom, it was just a mix-up." "I see," I said. "So who was laughing?" They both blinked. "I heard you," I added, "as you drove away." Todd cleared his throat. "That wasn't about you." "No?" I looked at the box. "What's that?" "A tart," he said. "Your favorite." "Interesting. My favorite was strawberry rhubarb. George's favorite was lemon." Liz winced. "Mom, we're not here to fight." "Good," I said, stepping aside. "Then don't." They entered awkwardly, hovering by the hallway. I didn't invite them farther. Liz took a breath. "Look, I know you're upset. But yesterday, well, everything was moving so fast. Todd had a conference call, and Carter had soccer, and you left me in a parking lot with no explanation and drove away with my husband's ashes," I said evenly. "There is no calendar busy enough to make that acceptable." Todd shifted his weight. "We thought maybe you'd want a moment alone." "I did," I said. "I wanted it after the service, in peace, not in confusion." "We came right back," Liz said. "The receptionist told us you'd left." 36 minutes later, I corrected. I timed it. She looked down. "Mom, I'll save you the effort," I continued. "You're not here to apologize. You're here because the bank froze the accounts yesterday." Silence. Liz's eyes darted up. "They did? I assume your cards were declined?" She didn't answer. "I'm not angry," I said. "That would mean I expected better. I'm just done." Todd stepped forward, his voice tight. "Martha, with all due respect, we've been under a lot of pressure." "And I've been under your thumb for 15 years, I replied. "It ends now." Liz tried again. "Mom, we can talk about this. We can fix it." "No," I said. "You can't. Because what you broke wasn't financial. It was trust. And I let it break slowly, thinking love would fix it. But love without respect is pity. And I'm not taking that from you. Not anymore." The tart box sat untouched in Todd's hands. Liz blinked rapidly. "So, what now?" I met her gaze. "Now you figure out how to live without my money, without my home, without my name tied to your debt." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Are you cutting us out of your will?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Todd opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but saw something in my face and closed it again. They left 5 minutes later, the tart still sitting on the hallway table. After the door clicked shut behind them, I stood there for a long while, not shaking, not doubting, just breathing. Later, I packed the tart into the fridge. I'd give it to Lily next time she came by. She actually liked lemon. Then I sat at the window and watched the wind move through the trees, light slipping through the leaves like something soft and final. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was balance. I expected the next strike to come through voicemail. Instead, it came in the form of paperwork. A courier envelope pushed into my hands the next morning by a breathless young man who apologized 3 times for the weather, then jogged back to his van as if afraid I might read it in front of him. Inside, a polite but pointed letter from a real estate lawyer I didn't know. Attached, a clarification request regarding joint ownership of the house. Specifically, a suggestion that, given your age and current living status, it might be advisable to consider voluntary property succession for estate simplification. My house. George's house. The one with the creaking porch and the peeling shutters and the apple tree he planted in '89. They weren't even subtle anymore. I folded the letter, returned it to its envelope, and set it gently on the edge of the kitchen counter, like it was a dead insect I didn't want to touch again. Then I went upstairs. There, in the hallway closet, I pulled down the box marked Deeds, Wills, Titles. George had kept everything. He never trusted digital records. "If the power's out, paper still stands," he used to say. The house was purchased in 1976. Mortgage paid in full by 1993. split evenly between George and me. No transfer, no trust, no clause that gave Liz or anyone else the right to even ask about it. I smiled. Then I pulled out the bright yellow notepad and added a new line to the list. Attempted claim on residence, 3 to 18. Response pending. I didn't call them. Let them wonder. Instead, I called Henry. They've started moving, I said as soon as he picked up. They want the house. Of course they do, he said. You've made it clear they're cut off, so now they'll try to grab what isn't protected. It is protected. I know, but they don't. Good, I said. He paused. Do you want me to respond to the letter? No. Let them waste their money. After the call, I spent the afternoon going through George's files. I found the photo he'd kept in a manila folder marked important. The two of us at the beach, our feet covered in sand, me holding a lemonade, him squinting into the sun. He'd written on the back in his blocky, careful print, proof we were happy. I tucked it into my wallet. Around 4:30, the doorbell rang again. Not a courier this time. Lily. 16, hair in a loose braid, her face flushed from the wind. Hi, Grandma, she said, holding up a takeout bag. I brought Thai. Mom says you don't like it, but I remember you liked it when I was little. She stepped inside before I could answer, already kicking off her boots. You okay? She asked, more softly. I nodded. Better now. She followed me into the kitchen and set the bag on the table, unpacking with the confidence of someone who knew where everything was. The plates, the spoons, the tea towels. We didn't talk about her parents right away. We talked about school, about her debate team, about how she'd finally broken up with the boy I never liked and now saw why I never liked him. Then, between bites of noodles, she looked up. They're freaking out, you know. I imagine. They say you're making things worse. I'm not making anything, I said. I'm just no longer fixing it. She nodded slowly. I told them I was coming here, she said. Dad said it was a bad idea. Did he? I came anyway. That part was clear. She set down her fork. I don't know all the details, Grandma, but I know this. You never asked for much. You just showed up. Quiet, but always there. And now they're mad that you're not. I felt my eyes sting, but didn't let them blur. You don't owe them an explanation, she added. You don't owe them anything. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're the only one who gets that, I said. Then let me help. She came again the next day, and the one after that. Helped with errands. Cleaned out the attic without being asked. Made tea. Asked questions about George. Not about the will, not about the trust, but about the man. That Sunday, I gave her the tart from the fridge. She laughed when I told her who it was meant for. They even get the desserts wrong, she said. Later that night, I saw a photo on her social media. Her holding a slice, captioned, Lemon Justice. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The girl knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew who she was doing it for. The letter didn't go unanswered for long. By Thursday, another envelope arrived. Same courier, same apologetic expression. This time, the tone inside was different, firmer, more urgent, less polite. It referenced legal rights, uncooperative disposition, and, my personal favorite, failure to engage in responsible estate discussions. I read it once. Then again, aloud this time, because sometimes hearing the absurdities gives them proper weight. Failure to engage. After all those years of Sunday dinners, birthday cakes I made from scratch, sleepless nights watching over sick grandkids, rent paid in silence, insurance premiums covered with a smile, I was now failing to engage. The nerve would have been laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. I didn't call them. I didn't respond. I called Henry. "They've escalated," I said. He chuckled. "Naturally. That's how entitlement behaves. It turns from suggestion to demand when ignored." "Can we make it hurt?" I asked. He paused, not expecting that question in my voice. "I mean legally," I added, dryly. "Can we make sure they know exactly how little ground they stand on?" "We can," he said. "Would you like me to draft a reply?" "Not to them," I said. "To Lily." "Pardon?" "I want to make it official. The trust. The house. Everything. I want it transferred in full, with immediate effect, managed by her name under your supervision." Henry was quiet for a moment. Then, "Martha, that's a serious step. So was watching them drive away with my husband's ashes." He didn't ask anything more, just said, "I'll begin today." That night, I found George's old radio and tuned it to his favorite jazz station. The reception crackled, but I kept it on. I let the saxophone notes fill the room, filling all the parts of me that had been hollow for weeks, maybe years. I cooked a full dinner for myself. No low-sodium anything, no skim milk, no accommodations for other people's diets. Just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, buttered peas. I even made gravy from scratch. I ate at the kitchen table by candlelight. George would have laughed, called it dramatic, then joined in. He never believed in sulking. "If you're gonna stew, make it into soup," he once said. After dinner, I sat down and wrote Lily a letter. Not a legal one. Henry would handle those. A real one. In ink, with my own hand. I told her about the first time I met George, how he was nervous and pretended he knew how to waltz, how he stepped on my foot 3 times and still got a second date. I told her how we bought the house, how the roof leaked for a year before we could fix it, how George made the fence out of salvaged wood, painted each plank by hand, and spelled my name into it with white flowers. I told her none of it was perfect, but all of it was real. And now, it would be hers. Not because I needed someone to remember me, because I needed someone to carry what mattered forward. Someone who understood that what you build with your hands means more than what you inherit with your name. The next morning, I mailed the letter before I could second-guess it. Then I made an appointment at the bank. "Just updating signatories," I told Patrick, the manager, "tying up loose ends." He glanced over the documents Henry had faxed. "Everything seems in order," he said, then hesitated. "You're sure this is what you want?" "I'm sure," I said. By noon, it was done. I walked out of the bank and sat on the bench across the street looking at nothing in particular. Just feeling the wind on my face, the sun on my hands, and the strange, quiet pulse of something I hadn't felt in years. Control. It didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel whole. Lily came by the next afternoon, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her braid a little looser than usual. "I got your letter," she said, holding it in her hands like it was breakable. "I read it 3 times. I nodded. "And?" "I cried," she said simply, "at the part about the fence, and the flowers, and the soup." "You always liked stories better than toys," I said, "even when you were small." She sat across from me, placed the letter gently on the table. "Why me, Grandma?" I didn't pretend not to understand. I just looked at her. "You know why," I said. She shook her head, still not looking away. "But I haven't done anything." "Exactly," I said. "You never did anything to me. You never took. You never expected. You just came." She looked down. "They're going to hate me for this." "I know," I said, "but not more than they already do for not being able to control me." Lily didn't smile. She wasn't the kind to be smug. She just folded her hands together and asked, "What do I do with it?" "With what?" "All of it. The trust. The house. Everything." "You take care of it," I said. "Not because it's valuable, but because it matters. This place. These stories. They weren't expensive to build, but they cost everything." She nodded slowly. "And when you're ready," I added, "you build something of your own, with the same care, the same truth." She looked around the kitchen, then out the window toward the back garden. George's rose bushes had gone to branch, bare and stubborn against the frost. "You think I'm ready?" "You wouldn't be asking if you weren't." We sat in silence a while, sipping tea. Lily had brought ginger biscuits this time, not too sweet, the kind I liked best. "They're going to come after me," she said eventually. "Not just you. Me." "They already are," I said. "Todd called the bank this morning pretending to be your financial advisor." Patrick shut it down. Her eyebrows lifted. "Seriously?" "Seriously." "And Mom?" I took a breath. "She hasn't called, but she sent a message through Henry's office. Strongly worded. Something about undue influence and incompetent decision-making." Lily let out a low breath. "They think I'm senile," I added. "Or rather, they hope I am. Makes it easier to discredit my choices." "But you're not." "No," I said. "I'm old. That's different." We both smiled, briefly. "I'll protect it," she said after a while. "Whatever it is now, whatever it becomes, I'll protect it. I know you will." Later, as she put on her coat, she paused at the doorway and turned back. "Grandma, if things get ugly—" "They will," I said. "But that's all right. I've been through ugly before. I've been through poor, through sick, through alone. This is nothing." She smiled then. A real one. "I'll see you Sunday," she said. I watched her walk down the steps, steady and upright. When she was little, she used to stumble constantly. Always had scraped knees and mismatched socks, but even then, she never cried. She just stood back up and kept going. George used to say, "That one? She's made of wire and glue." I hadn't understood it back then. I did now. That night, the phone rang again. This time, I answered. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew what came next and I was ready to look it in the eye. "Mom," Liz's voice came through the line, clipped and sharp. "We need to talk." I didn't speak right away. Let her sit in the silence she never used to notice. "Are you there?" she said, impatient now. "I'm here." She exhaled, not relief but irritation. "You've put us in an impossible position." "Have I?" I said. "Yes. Todd's been on the phone with the bank all day. They won't release the funds. They say you removed our access." "I did. Without warning." I almost laughed. "You think I owed you a warning before I stopped letting you drain me? That's not fair." "It's not?" "We had arrangements." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You had expectations. I allowed them. That's not the same." There was a pause. I could hear movement. Maybe she was pacing. Or maybe she just couldn't sit still with the truth pressed against her ear. "I don't know what Lily told you," she began. "Lily didn't tell me anything," I said. "You did. With your silence. With your behavior. With that letter you sent me through a lawyer instead of your own voice." She scoffed. "You're overreacting." "To what, exactly? Being left in a parking lot while you drove off with my husband's ashes?" "That was—" "Don't," I said. Quiet, firm. "Don't rewrite it." The silence stretched again, but now it was brittle. "I don't know what you're trying to prove," she said. "Nothing." "Then why all this drama? Cutting us out? Giving everything to Lily?" Because I finally remembered who I am, I said. And who you've become. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. I could hear her breathing shift, the rhythm no longer controlled. We took care of you, she said suddenly, voice trembling with anger. After Dad died, we were the ones who handled everything. The estate, the bills, the cremation. You didn't want to deal with it. You didn't let me. That's not true. You told me I was fragile, that I should rest, that George wouldn't want me to stress. He wouldn't, she snapped. He also wouldn't want his ashes driven off in the back seat like a takeout order. Don't be cruel. I was quiet for a moment. I've spent the last 10 years being careful not to be cruel, I said. It didn't make you kinder. It just made you bolder. You've turned Lily against us. No, you did that. She's just a child. She's 16, and she has more dignity in her than the two of you combined. The line went silent again. Then, she'll regret it, Liz said. You're putting her in the middle of something she doesn't understand. No, I said, voice low now. You're the one who put her there. I'm just giving her a way out. There was a click. She'd hung up. I sat there for a while, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, before setting the phone gently back on its cradle. The sun had started to set, throwing long shadows across the living room. George's chair looked like it was waiting for someone. For a moment, I thought I heard him. Not his voice exactly, just the memory of it. That's the thing about finally saying no, he once told me after I'd walked out of a PTA meeting in tears. It only hurts the people who've gotten too used to hearing yes. He was right. Liz wasn't wounded. She was startled. And startled people lash out. Not because they're betrayed, but because their grip slipped. I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the first stars prick the sky. They would come again, with pleading or with threats. Didn't matter. I'd stopped answering to guilt, and I sure as hell wasn't going to start answering to fear. They didn't come the next day. They came the day after that. No phone call, no warning. Just Todd's SUV pulling into the driveway like nothing had changed, like he hadn't filed letters, made calls, pulled strings to try and take what wasn't his. Liz got out first. No makeup, not her usual blow-dried armor. Her face was bare, drawn, and, if I was generous, maybe even a little afraid. Todd followed, holding a manila folder. I didn't move to greet them. I didn't offer coffee. I opened the door and stood in the frame, hands clasped loosely, posture steady. I wasn't inviting them in. I was setting the tone. Mom? Liz said, trying a softer voice now, like we were back in the realm of civility. Can we talk? We are, she faltered, glancing at Todd. He stepped forward. Martha, this has gotten out of hand. No, I said. It's finally in hand. Mine. He held up the folder like it was a white flag. These are just documents, proposals, options. Nobody's demanding anything. Is that what your lawyer called it when he suggested I consider relinquishing residential control due to cognitive ambiguity? He blinked. I looked it up, I said. It's what they write when they want to put someone in a care facility without using the word facility. Liz's eyes darted to Todd, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. We were just trying to plan, she said. To prepare. For what? I asked. For the day I finally stopped funding your lifestyle? Her lips parted. No sound came out. I was never supposed to outlive my usefulness, I said. That was the real plan, wasn't it? Todd stepped in again. We were worried. You've been making impulsive decisions. The trust. The house. The bank accounts. Impulsive? I repeated. These are decisions I should have made 10 years ago. The only impulse was in waiting this long. Liz's voice cracked. So that's it? You're just cutting us off completely? No, I said. I'm setting boundaries. You can live your lives, just not on my back. But we're your family. I know. Then act like it, she snapped. I tilted my head slightly. You first. Todd held out the folder again. Just look through this. Please. It's a compromise. I didn't take it. Instead, I looked at Liz. You left me in a parking lot, Liz. You didn't forget me. You made a choice. Her eyes welled up, but not with shame, with fury. The kind that rises when you realize the person you dismissed still holds the final word. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I already regret what came before it. They stood there another few seconds, and then, when it was clear I wasn't going to change my mind or reach for the folder, they turned and left. No shouting, no final blow, just silence. As they drove away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt solid. After they were gone, I took a walk around the backyard. George's tools still hung on the rusted nail under the porch. His gardening gloves were stiff with age, but I couldn't throw them away. I ran my fingers over the wooden handle of his spade. He always said you don't pull weeds just once. You check again in a few days. They like to come back. This wasn't over, but they knew now. The ground had changed. That night, I opened the trunk at the foot of the bed. It hadn't been touched in years. Not since George got sick and the days began to blur together with hospital chairs, medication alarms, and quiet refusals to talk about the inevitable. The trunk held the bones of our life. Old tax returns, warranties for appliances we no longer owned, receipts yellowed with time. But underneath those layers were the things that still breathed. A bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine, mine to George during his deployment in '66, and his to me, folded carefully, his handwriting precise and slow. He'd always said letters were his way of saying the things he couldn't quite say out loud. I untied the twine, not to read them, but to hold them. There was one more folder in the bottom of the trunk. Manila, like the one Todd had held earlier, but heavier. Not with paper, with weight. Emotional weight. Inside was the last will George and I had updated together, signed 7 years ago, notarized, reviewed twice by Henry. At the time, it had seemed straightforward, split evenly, modest bequest to the grandchildren, the rest to Liz as our only child. George had insisted. She'll do the right thing, he said. I had believed it too, back then. But people aren't static. They shift. Sometimes they harden. Sometimes they calcify into something you no longer recognize. I'd watched the change slowly. After George died, Liz took the reins. At first, gently, then with increasing grip. She meant well, I told myself. She's overwhelmed. She's grieving, too. But grief doesn't erase kindness. It only tests its limits. Over the years, she began speaking for me. At doctor's offices, at the bank. It's just easier, she'd say. Less confusing for everyone. At first, I let her. I was tired. And what did it matter? She was my daughter. But then came the deeper cuts, the silent ones. The family gatherings I wasn't told about because we thought you'd be too tired. The decisions made in group texts I wasn't included in. The birthday party where I was placed at the far end of the table, next to the coat rack and a screaming toddler I didn't know. And I endured it all. Until George's ashes left in a car I wasn't welcome to ride in. That was the line. Some lines don't need to be drawn. They're carved. Now I pulled the will out, unfolded it, and stared at our signatures. He trusted her, and so did I. But trust, once cracked, doesn't heal like skin. It hardens like porcelain, and the break always shows. I folded the document back up, returned it to the trunk, and turned off the light. In the morning, I called Henry. "We need to formally revoke the previous will," I said. "Immediately." "I've already started," he said. "Your trust supersedes it, but we'll file the new paperwork first thing. Make sure Liz receives a copy." "Are you sure you want to do that now?" "Yes," I said. "She deserves to know exactly where she stands." Later that day, I opened the safe behind the hall mirror and removed the original deed to the house. George's handwriting was in the margins. Notes about the property line, the furnace, when the chimney was last cleaned. It wasn't just a house. It was evidence of effort, of time, of who we were before everything became convenience and shortcuts. I scanned it all and sent it to Henry. Backups. Always backups. At lunch, I made tuna salad the way George liked it, with extra pickle, no celery. I ate it at the table where we used to sit, where Lily now sometimes joined me. And then I waited, because I knew this change, this final legal confirmation, would light the match they'd been waving for weeks. And when it did, I would not flinch. The letter arrived 2 days later. Cream-colored envelope. Heavy stock. The kind meant to convey importance, as if the thickness of the paper could soften the ugliness of the contents. This one wasn't from Todd's lawyer. It was from Liz herself. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. Cleaned the sink. Fed the neighborhood cat that had started appearing by the porch in the afternoons. Skinny, gray, missing half an ear. I'd started calling him Charles, after my grandfather. Stubborn and half-wild, but polite enough to sit still when I spoke. Only after all that did I sit down, slit the envelope, and unfold the 3 neatly typed pages. Her tone had shifted again. No longer sharp. No longer apologetic. Now it was measured, coded with what she probably thought was logic. She called my actions unilateral and deeply hurtful. She referred to my decisions as confused and potentially manipulated. She cited my age 4 separate times. She reminded me that family decisions should be made with family input. And she closed with a thinly veiled threat. "We don't want to involve outside agencies, but we will if we feel there's cause for concern." Cause for concern. I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table, and stared out the window. George had once said, "The more you tell someone no, the more convinced they get that you don't understand the question." Liz didn't think she'd been denied something. She thought I was making a mistake that needed correction. Correction through force if necessary. At 2:15 p.m., I called Henry. "I received a letter," I said. He didn't ask what it said. "Do you want to respond?" "No," I said, "but I want to act." I told him everything. The attempts to question my capacity, the veiled threat of guardianship, the implication that I was being unduly influenced. "And Lily?" he asked. "She's fine. They haven't come near her. Yet." He paused. "We can make this airtight, ironclad. A trust under joint legal supervision, with clauses that activate upon any attempt to contest." "Yes," I said. "Do it." When I hung up, I didn't feel afraid. I felt finished. Finished pretending this was a misunderstanding. Finished hoping Liz might come around. Finished waiting for the daughter I used to know to come back. She was gone. Not dead. Not vanished. Just transformed into someone who measured love in assets and loyalty in control. And that wasn't someone I could save. Later, Lily stopped by. She found me in the garden, trimming back what was left of the lavender bush. She sat beside me in the grass, brushing dried leaves off her jeans. Mom says you're being reckless, she said quietly. I didn't look up. She said it in writing, too. She's trying to rally people. Aunt Martha, Uncle Dan, says you're not well. Says I'm too young to know what's happening. And what do you say? Lily didn't hesitate. I say I'm not confused, and neither are you. I smiled, even if it didn't quite reach my eyes. I never wanted this to be a battle, I said. I know, she replied. But you didn't start it. You're just the first one who didn't back down. We finished in silence, the two of us kneeling in the garden, hands in the dirt, pruning what was dead to make room for what might grow again. After she left, I returned to the house and placed Liz's letter in the fireproof box where I kept my passport, George's discharge papers, and now the new trust documents. Proof of who I'd become, of what I'd refused to let continue, and of what no letter, no lawyer would ever undo. By the end of March, the ground had begun to thaw. The grass still held patches of frost in the shade, but the air smelled different, softer, earthier. George always said you could tell spring was coming, not by the temperature, but by the smell of the soil waking up. I was waking up too. The trust was finalized that week. Henry delivered the documents himself, tucked neatly in a blue folder, every page initialed, every clause reviewed twice. It's done, he said, setting the folder gently on the table. They can't touch it now. Not a dime. Not an acre. I nodded, but didn't reach for the papers right away. Lily will get a notice in the mail, he added, with full instructions. But she already understands, doesn't she? She does. Henry leaned back in his chair. You've set something in motion, Martha. Something big. I didn't set it, I said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already moving. He gave a small, respectful smile. Not the condescending kind people give older women when we use words like power or plan. Real respect, like he'd finally seen what had been there all along. After he left, I placed the folder in the safe, next to George's things. Later that afternoon, I drove into town. Not for errands, not for groceries, for something else. I parked by the courthouse and walked 2 blocks to the small building with the green shutters and the plaque out front. Bellamy Community Center. In memory of George Bellamy, 1942-2024. The center had been his idea years ago, back when he volunteered at the local shelter and said the kids needed more than soup and sermons. They need space, he told me, and something with their name on it. I'd laughed at the time. What name? Yours? He'd grinned. Why not? They'll remember it better than Smith. Back then, we didn't have the money. And then when we did, George got sick. And the plan sat in a folder, untouched. Now, it wouldn't sit anymore. I met with the director, a kind woman named Alma who hugged me without asking first and cried when I handed her the donation notice. This is everything, she said, voice breaking. This is more than we hoped for. I nodded. He would have wanted it quiet, nothing flashy. We'll keep his name small on the sign. And the kids? They'll have books, computers, meals, after-school programs, all of it. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. The walk back to the car felt lighter. Not because I'd done something noble, but because I'd finally done something real. Something that couldn't be twisted or taken or erased. When I got home, Lily was already there, sitting on the porch steps, a book in her lap. She looked up. Where were you? Putting your grandfather's name where it belonged. She smiled. And where's that? On something worth remembering. We went inside. I made tea. She told me about her upcoming debate finals. I asked what topic. Restorative justice, she said. Whether it's effective. Whether it lasts. Is it? I asked. She thought for a moment. Only when people stop pretending harm never happened. I nodded. Then you'll win. That night, I lit a single candle on the mantel. No pictures, no prayer, no big gesture. Just light. Soft and steady. A small, firm mark in the dark. The next knock at the door came just after noon on a Wednesday. Not a courier this time. Not Todd. Not Liz. It was Madison, the younger one, Lily's sister. She was 17 now, though I still remembered her best with pigtails and strawberry jam on her cheeks, laughing at everything and nothing at all. She stood on the porch, arms folded, eyes shadowed with a kind of worry that didn't belong to someone her age. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was visiting a place she barely remembered. She sat at the kitchen table, same chair Lily always chose. I poured tea, though she didn't ask for it. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," she said finally. "Who told you that?" "Dad. He said you're dangerous now." I almost smiled. "Am I?" She looked at me, truly looked. "No, you're not." We sat in silence a moment. "I read Mom's letter," she said quietly. "She left it out." "Did you?" "I didn't understand most of it. Just that she thinks you're confused." "And what do you think?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I think she's scared. Not of you. Of losing." "Losing what?" "The version of her life where she's the one in control?" I said nothing. Sometimes silence says more than any affirmation. Madison picked at a thread on her sleeve. "Is it true? About the house? The trust?" "Yes." "And Lily?" "Yes." "She's not even the oldest." "She's not even trying to be anything," I said. "She just is. And that's more than enough." Madison nodded, slowly. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Do you hate them?" I looked out the window for a moment, where the wind had begun to shake the trees just enough to remind the house we were still in March. "No," I said finally. "Hate takes energy. I've spent enough of that on people who think love is a transaction." She nodded, her expression older than it should have been. "Do you think they'll ever stop?" she asked. "Trying to get it back." "They'll stop," I said, "when they've told themselves a version of the story they can live with." "What do you mean?" "They'll say I was senile, or manipulated, or bitter, that I played favorites, that I forgot what family means." "Is that what happened?" "No," I said. "But that's what they'll need to believe, so they don't have to face what they did." Madison didn't speak for a long time. Then, "I don't want to end up like that." "You won't," I said, "because you're here." She stayed for an hour. We didn't talk much more. I let her sit in the quiet, let her feel what it was like to be in a place that didn't ask anything of her. When she left, she hugged me. Not quickly, not awkwardly. A real hug. That night, I wrote her name beside Lily's in my ledger. Not legal, not binding. Just mine. Because some things are worth recording even if no one else ever sees them. The invitation wasn't fancy. Just thick cream cardstock with embossed lettering and a small blue bellflower pressed into the corner, George's favorite. I'd found the old seed packet in the shed, tucked behind the jars of screws and paintbrushes he never threw away. The event wasn't a service. I didn't want speeches or music or platitudes about a man who never liked crowds. It was a dedication. The community center had finished the renovations early. A fresh coat of paint, a new reading room, a backlot turned into a garden space. Lily said they'd already started a little vegetable patch, named each bed after someone from town. Mr. Sherman's tomatoes, Miss Patel's herbs, And now, George's bench. We held the gathering on a Sunday afternoon. Clear skies. Wind light enough to carry the smell of fresh mulch and lavender from the edge of the yard. People showed up, more than I expected. Some were kids who remembered George from the shelter days. Some were folks he'd helped quietly, fixing a leaky faucet, replacing a tire, delivering groceries without being asked. I didn't make a speech. Alma did. She stood near the garden gate and told them about a man who gave quietly, who never needed a stage, who said, "If you see a need and you've got hands, the question's already answered." People nodded. Some wiped their eyes. Lily stood beside me, not dressed up, not shy, just present, steady. Madison came too. She stood off to the side, arms folded like a shield, but her eyes never left me. Liz and Todd didn't come. Neither did Carter. I hadn't expected them to. After the ceremony, people wandered through the building, touched the new tables, flipped through the donated books. I stayed by the bench. Simple, wooden, no plaque. Just a small carving along the backrest. Built by hands that never stopped trying. George didn't care for grand legacies. He just wanted things to work, to hold. I sat down on the bench for a while, watching kids chase each other around the planter beds. One of them tripped and laughed, scraped his knee, and kept running. Lily sat next to me, quiet, as always. After a while, she said, "He'd be proud. I think he'd just ask why we didn't use cheaper wood." She laughed. "Did you know he helped my friend's mom fix her porch swing once? She said he brought his own tools and didn't even stay for lemonade." I nodded. "That sounds right." We sat a while longer. Then Lily reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I wanted you to see this." Inside, photos of the garden, a copy of the activity calendar, a list of the new programs launching next month. One page caught my eye. Bellamy Youth Grant, in memory of George Bellamy, for students pursuing trade work, elder care, or community service. I blinked at it. "You came up with that?" I asked. "Not alone," she said. "But yeah, he would have liked that. A lot." "I know." People began drifting out. Someone handed me a paper plate with half a slice of lemon tart. "Thought you might want the last one," they said. I looked at it, smiled, passed it to Lily. "Go on," I said. "Justice tastes better the second time." She laughed, took a bite, and we just sat there. No one needed to say it, but it hung between us anyway. He was gone. But what he built, and what he believed, wasn't. And now, it never would be. I didn't expect the last confrontation to come in person, but it did. A week after the dedication, on a Tuesday morning soft with rain, I heard the gate creak open. I'd left it unlatched, not out of forgetfulness, but instinct. Something in me knew the story hadn't fully closed. It was Liz. No folder this time. No husband. Just her, standing under a small blue umbrella, looking thinner than I remembered. Smaller, somehow, as if time had begun to fold her in at the edges. I opened the door but didn't step out. "May I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. She didn't touch hers. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then, quietly, she said, "You really did it." I nodded once. "You gave her everything." "Not everything," I said. "Just what mattered." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not here to ask for it back." "I know. I don't know who I am anymore." I studied her face, the lines that had deepened since Christmas, the way her shoulders hunched now like someone who expected to be scolded. "You're not a villain," I said. "You're just someone who stopped listening." She looked up. Her eyes were wet. Why didn't you tell me earlier, before it got so far? I tried, I said. But you were always busy. Always speaking for me, not to me. She looked away. I thought I was helping, she whispered. I know. The clock ticked. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. Good, I replied, because it's not something I hand out like tea cookies. She almost smiled. Almost. But I am sorry, she said. I let that sit between us, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of what came next. I'm not changing the trust, I said. That part of the story is closed. She nodded. I know. But if you want to write a new chapter, not with money, not with claims, just with truth, then the door's open. For that. She looked up, startled. Not wide, I added, but open. A silence passed between us that wasn't bitter this time. I don't deserve that, she said. No one does, I said. That's not how grace works. She left not long after, said thank you, took her umbrella, walked out into the soft drizzle without looking back, and I didn't watch her go. That night, Lily came by. She didn't ask about her mother. She just brought warm bread wrapped in foil and told me about a kid at the center who'd drawn George with a cape. He said he was a hero, she said, grinning. He was, I said. Just never needed the cape. We ate the bread with butter, sat by the window, watched the porch light catch the rain like gold. Then Lily leaned over and said quietly, You should write this down, all of it. Maybe one day, I said, but it's already written. In every silence I held, every line I drew, everything I chose not to let slip through my hands. And maybe it's written here too for someone like you. If it is, if this story made you stop for a second, or remember something real, or breathe a little deeper, then let it keep moving. Pass it on. Share it. Let someone else feel what I couldn't say out loud until now. You are allowed to stop being silent. You are allowed to say no. And sometimes saying no is the loudest, kindest thing you can do.